Good morning, everyone. I am Kamala Rampersad da Silva, Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our 5th annual Global Conference on Corporate Governance. We are live streaming today's session on our YouTube channel, and it is also being cast on LinkedIn. So hello to everyone who has joined us, whether you are here in the room at CCGI or if you are online. Many thanks to our social media support, Warren Anderson, who has really been doing an excellent job this year in helping us to have greater reach on our social media channels. In welcoming all of you, I want to share that the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute is a nonprofit membership organization, and we welcome everyone who wishes to join in our purpose of improving corporate governance practices in the Caribbean region. Today, we are pleased to share that our membership reflects persons from not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but from Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, Guyana, the British Virgin Islands, St. Martin, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Belize. So, if you are not yet a member, do consider joining us and actively contribute to the conversation on how we can improve leadership and governance to achieve sustainable outcomes. Persons may join either as an individual member or your organization may pay for bundle membership. Our signature event is Governance Week, which is generally held during the month of June. But we also offer a range of workshops and panel discussions on evolving issues in governance. And all of these are held primarily online to easily facilitate participation throughout the Caribbean region. So we are pleased to have so many of you who are attending this global conference from around the Caribbean. And I also want to take some time to express appreciation to our sponsors. We have 3 bronze sponsors this year. Angostura Limited, returning as a sponsor for a second year running. And we have 2 new sponsors, HRC and Associates Limited from Trinidad and Tobago, and the Pan Jamaica Group Limited from Jamaica. We are extremely appreciative of our sponsors who have made it possible for us to offer free attendance to this conference to all of our members. So over the next 2 days, you can expect to hear from a wide range of experts, including our keynote speaker, President Armen Sarkissian from Armenia. We also will be hearing from Professor Bob Garrett, our global ambassador and author of The Fish Rots from the Head and Stop the Rot. This global conference really was the brainchild of Professor Garrett, who encouraged us after he had served as our inaugural speaker for our Governance Week. So it's always a pleasure to have Professor Garrett with us. You would have received the link with the detailed agenda and the profiles of our speakers for the next 2 days. And you will see from that there really are some remarkable people who will be sharing their experience and expertise over the next 2 days. We would like to thank each of them sincerely for taking the time to be a part of this conference. Now, just before we get to today's proceedings, though, I do want to share that we have a range of upcoming events set for Guyana later this month. We have 2 workshops, a panel discussion, and our governance dinner. We begin with a workshop on insurance and risk on Tuesday, November 19th, followed by a 2-day workshop on governance and compliance. Both workshops will be facilitated by Claire Gomez-Miller, who is present here with us today. So good morning to you, Claire. And then,
everyone.
Thank you, Claire. We will host a panel discussion in Guyana looking at effective board papers, and this is geared specifically for our Corporate Secretaries Network. But really and truly, everyone who is involved in governance should attend because it is important to have effective boardrooms for everyone. After which we will have some unique Guyana games that we would play around a bonfire in Guyana. So some fun activities as well. The week will culminate with a governance dinner and end of year networking event on Saturday, November 23rd, when the opening keynote will be our beloved Professor Bob Garrett. We are so pleased to be having him come and join us in the region as our global ambassador for the first time. So we are anxiously awaiting his arrival. All of these events will be held at Splashman's Resort, which is a beautiful and unique facility built around a man-made lake in Georgetown. Registration is already open and we are offering special packages for room and meals for the weekend. And of course, as you would imagine, space at Splashman's is limited. So we encourage persons to let us know very early if you're interested in coming over to stay for the period of time that we are there. I would also like to make a few short housekeeping announcements, which we always do here at CCGI. We are asking, please, that you ensure your name is correctly captured on your screen. This is because we are in a virtual room together, which allows each of us to engage and access freely with other participants in the room. It's not a webinar. And so we like to have everyone being easily identifiable. Also, we ask everyone to keep their microphones on mute throughout the sessions. During the Q&A segments, if you wish to ask a question, you would be invited to speak, but please mute your microphones as soon as you are done to minimize any disruptive noises in the background. And of course, throughout the conference, you can make comments or place questions in the chat feature, and we will address them. And now I would like to invite one of our sponsors to share a few words of greetings for us. As I mentioned, we have 3 sponsors this year. And I must say that sponsorship is very often the lifeblood of NGOs like ours. And we are thankful to our 3 sponsors, Angostura Limited, HRC and Associates, and Pan Jamaica Group Limited for their generous contribution. So at this point, I want to invite our representative from Angostura Limited, who will speak on behalf of the sponsors and share a few words of greetings. So I would like to invite Katrina Batiste-Assy, Group General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of Angostura, to offer some greetings.
Thank you so much, Kamala. Good morning, everyone. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to bring greetings on behalf of the proud sponsors of CCGI's 5th Global Governance Conference. As Kamala said, Angostura Holdings Limited, which I represent, the Pan Jamaica Group, and HRC Associates. When we at Angostura learned of this year's theme, Governance of Small States, Creating a Brave and Sustainable Future, we were eager to be a part of such an important dialogue. As a homegrown company ourselves, coming from a small island developing state of Trinidad and Tobago. We recognize that governance has evolved from the traditional focus on ensuring accountability, transparency, and regulatory compliance, and has expanded to integrate ESG criteria, which emphasize sustainability and ethical responsibility as core aspects of decision-making. This shift reflects a broader commitment amongst organizations and states to address environmental impact, social responsibility, and sustainable growth, aligning governance practices with the long-term welfare of stakeholders, communities, and the planet. Angostura is excited to support discussions that drive positive change in our communities and our planet. Small states play a crucial role in the global landscape. They face unique challenges when it comes to sustainability, from climate change and rising sea levels to resource limitations and economic vulnerabilities. However, they also often demonstrate incredible resilience, rich cultures, and innovative approaches that can serve as models for sustainable development. For those of you who don't know, Angostura is famously known for its world-renowned aromatic bitters and its superb collection of award-winning iconic rum brands. This year, we celebrate our 200th anniversary. We have a geographic reach into 170 countries, and we're a public company listed on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. Angostura is also known for its dedication to maintaining sustainable manufacturing operations. For example, by our investment in a state-of-the-art water resource recovery and anaerobic digester facility, fostering positive environmental impacts, for example, through ethical and sustainable sourcing of raw materials such as molasses and packaging materials, and the many other green projects that are in the pipeline. We also support our communities by promoting social sustainability. For example, the launch of our scholarship for students in the performing arts who are financially unable to access tertiary education, raising over $500,000 for the Credo Foundation for Abandoned Children, among many other initiatives. And finally, upholding the highest standards of governance. In October 2022, the Angostura Cocoa Bitters Sustainable Future Initiative was launched. It is a partnership with Uber Green, which focuses on farmer education and empowerment to support the survival of the Trinitario cocoa variety, and it promotes a continued quality of Trinidad's Trinitario cocoa on the world stage, captured through digital storytelling and documentary filmmaking. At Angostura, we have always been more than just a company. We are a family and a community deeply rooted in the values that have guided us through 2 centuries of excellence. Earlier this year, as part of our 200th anniversary celebrations, we launched the Angostura Foundation, which is dedicated to achieving social responsibility and community well-being through sustainable initiatives. The foundation's initiatives and projects embody the company's core values of passion, respect, integrity, mutual trust, and excellence. Our values have guided us through 2 centuries of innovation and success, and they will continue to guide our projects, programs, and initiatives through the Angostura Foundation. By aligning our projects with our values, we ensure that our efforts are not only impactful, but also reflective of the very essence of who we are as a company. Today, thanks to the CCGI, we have the unique opportunity to learn from international experts and thought leaders, and to engage in discussions geared towards finding actionable solutions for small states in their efforts to create a sustainable future. Kudos to the CCGI and Kamala for organizing this great event, and here's an exciting and successful global conference. Over to you, Kamala.
Thank you so much, Katrina. And it is always a pleasure to have Angostura with us, especially because the company really does demonstrate how we can grow even from a small state to global excellence. So wonderful having you. Now, those of you who attended last year's global conference may recall our theme was governing in a polycrisis, building sustainable organizations. In this, we explored the many crises facing our organizations today, from global warming to AI, the escalating wars between big countries, which has impacted supply chain, among many other issues. We ended the year facing a grave reality of how tough the world has become. And then in January of this year, Professor Bob Garrett advised me that I needed to get this book called The Small State Club: How Smart States Can Save the World. It was not yet available for purchase, but he promised me that it was so insightful and apt for us in the Caribbean region. And when I did get it, I was truly amazed. The Small States Club explores 10 countries which at different times have done exceptionally well in positioning themselves at a global level. These countries include Singapore, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Israel, Estonia, Switzerland, Ireland, Botswana, Jordan, and Armenia. The stories of each of these countries resounded with me deeply, as I expected Professor Garrett thought that it would. For instance, President Sarkissian writes of the escalating confrontation between the US and China and its impact on Singapore. The imposition of tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods on both sides, coupled with Washington's ban on the Chinese tech giant Huawei, inflicted collateral damage in the complex global production chains in which Singapore was intricately involved. he wrote on page 40. When writing about Qatar, he said that that country had perfected the hedging strategy, a nuanced approach that allows small states to pivot quickly and respond to any number of uncertain challenges and threats. And the United Arab Emirates, he said, used oil as a valuable resource, but they did not make it their primary resource. Oil revenues, he said, account for 30% of UAE's GDP because the UAE's leaders made calculated investments in their people, guided by rational motives rather than mere altruism. The country, among its many achievements, is also a trailblazer in combating climate change and stands proudly among the world's top 3 solar energy producers. And the city of Sharjah have transformed waste into a valuable energy resource, with 3/4 of their urban landfill waste already successfully eliminated. When he wrote about Botswana, President Sarkissian said that it was a country which was caught up in severe drought and crop failure 2 years before its independence. And at the time, he described it as the second poorest country in the world. Today, he said, due to strong leadership and a clean political culture, the country avoided the resource curse when diamonds began to be mined. And with a quality, today it offers quality health, education, and infrastructure projects so that Botswana has now become the envy of the continent and a model for small states everywhere. While these were all interesting, to me, the most impactful were the stories from Ireland and his home country of Armenia. We in the Caribbean are familiar with the stories of the sufferings underwent by our forefathers and ancestors during slavery and indentureship. However, I don't believe we truly understand the suffering that can compare, with let's say Ireland in particular, where a million people perished from starvation and disease during the late 18th century. And that was, he says, only in the 1980s that Ireland really began to fully emancipate itself from underdevelopment and economic stagnation. Yet in those short decades, they truly became a global powerhouse. Today, only 10% of people who describe themselves as Irish lives in Ireland. But President Sarkissian writes in his book that their huge diaspora around the world helped them to build a very effective network. And he described that as how the leadership were able to make use of what resources were available to them. And for me, these stories can help make a difference. When we think of what are the innovations that can help us in the Caribbean deal with the challenges of climate emergency and evolving artificial intelligence, how can we take the Caribbean region into greater prosperity? These are the thoughts I expect us to engage our minds with over the 2 days as we listen to speakers from Singapore, Botswana, Ireland, the United Arab Emirates, the UK and US, Belize, Jamaica, Guyana, Barbados, Grenada, and of course here in Trinidad and Tobago. So there is much for us to discuss over the 2 days and to share. So I would want us to be open to being very candid in our conversations, always, as we always are here at CCGI, because our purpose is to learn and grow together. At this point, I would just want to do a very quick check whether President Sarkissian is available. Okay, so he will be joining us within the next 10 minutes, and therefore what I would want to do is ask our panelists to share their thoughts very briefly on what they may consider the necessary ingredients to produce the quality of leadership that will take countries from poverty to prosperity. And this really was the common thread in his book. A lot of countries were able to engage in many different strategies, but the common thread was really quality leadership. How can we build leaders who would be able to demonstrate this kind of quality for us in the Caribbean region? And I know I am putting my panelists on the spot because they would have been expecting to respond to President Sarkissian. But maybe we can begin with our chairman, uh, Nigel. I know this is something that would always have been to the forefront of your mind in terms of how do we improve our leadership here so that governance is so much more effective in the Caribbean. So may I ask you to unmute, and also Professor Garrett, we'd want to hear your thoughts as well after Nigel. And I believe I saw Mfo here. She has joined us from Botswana. So
Good morning, John. Thank you very much. And thank you for the very insightful interview. I've been using
okay, Nigel, we're having a little challenge with hearing you clearly now. So I'm glad you are hearing us.
Are you hearing me now? So are you better?
No, you're a little bit muffled, so I'm not sure if it's something that is
Take off this and see if it.
right. Yes, we're hearing you clearly now, so hopefully you are still hearing us.
I'm still hearing you, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, 3 weeks ago we attended a conference with Jim Collins on on greatness and in the organizational context, and I think it is very clear that the same ingredients are necessary to create a recipe for greatness in countries. And President Sarkissian very clearly identified some of those qualities, some of those ingredients. And of course, what Jim Collins referred to as level 5 leadership, that passion for the purpose with the humility to work with others. And I lived in Singapore and the Far East. I lived in Singapore for a year and experienced firsthand the miracle that is Singapore and what Lee was able to build, Lee Kuan Yew. And not only did he build it, he laid the foundation for its continued success. Now, I don't want to say that we follow the Singaporean model, and I don't think President Sarkissian is saying that we should follow any one model, but he speaks to the ingredients, that strong foundation of identity and purpose, the national mission and strong leadership and articulated vision. And interestingly, in the context of a country, a state, strategic planning. So you have to be very clear about where you want to go, and you have to engage the population in that mission in a very honest, in a very open, in a very transparent way. And what I also like about Dr. Sarkissian's book is the focus on pragmatism, not blind ideology. So those are some of the elements that I think I'm looking forward to engaging in the conversation.
Very nice. And I like those thoughts, you know, in terms of what makes a level 5 leader. Probably one of the most important elements we need to learn and embrace more in the region is that humility. That is a fundamental part of that quality of leadership. And as you say, being able to have a strong national identity and patriotism that we want to do well and commit to that in the long term. I love those ideas. Professor Garrett, may we ask you to unmute and share your thoughts for 2-3 minutes as we await President Sarkissian's joining us.
Yes, I'm suitably wrong-footed, but happy to talk as ever. The thing that intrigues me and what I'll be following over the next 2 days is the notion of smart small states. What does smart actually mean? How is it that Singapore, as mentioned, Botswana, many other countries are beginning to create a particular niche in the world, not just on their own, not just in a stable state economy, but in a dynamic ecosystem. How are they actually doing that? And I think the key to that, and I'll say more about this when I have my little slot after the president has spoken, is around the whole issue of how do we learn, how do we think, and particularly for the next generation of directors, how are they going to need to think and learn rapidly? And smartness to me is not just about being bright, but it's about rapid learning and the implementation of fast learning. Otherwise, you tend to get dumped upon. So I'm intrigued by this, and I'm intrigued by some of the thinking that actually goes back certainly into the 60s and 70s on that seems to have got forgotten on the notion of ecosystems, support for each other. And the president has been strong in his book on unity and success, and unity, creating a platform of unity with the small states for supporting each other. And how are we going to do that? And how is CCGI going to play its point in it? I'm looking for answers, or at least possible ways ahead learning in those areas. And I think I would finish, if I go back to my time in South Africa, there was a phrase that was used by Nelson Mandela, which became almost a slogan for the country in the great days when it was really learning. And now it's gone into a decline, but it seems to be bouncing back again. But the phrase was Ubuntu. And Ubuntu means I am because you are. And that takes a bit of thinking through, and it needs to become, I think, a slogan for all of us. Back to the president's notion of unity, helping each other to success. So that's what I'm looking for.
Thank you so much, Professor Garrett, and certainly, I think that is important, understanding ourselves in relation to each other and being able to embrace that. So I'm happy to see that President Sarkissian is now with us. So if I invite my technical team to spotlight him as I introduce him formally to our audience here today, and invite him to deliver the keynote address. Great. So, Armen Sarkissian was president of the Republic of Armenia from 2018 to 2022. From 1996 to 97, he also served as Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia. In 1992, he was appointed as Ambassador of Armenia to the UK and served as Senior Ambassador to Europe, Ambassador to the EU, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Vatican, and the Head of Mission to NATO. From 2000 to 2013, President Sarkissian served as Special Advisor to the President, Chairman of the Global Council and Energy Council for the World Economic Forum. He was Chairman and founder of Eurasia Center at the Cambridge University and a board member at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and others. He also worked as a senior advisor to the chairman and CEOs of BP, Alcatel, Lucent, Telefonica, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and many other multinational corporations. Dr. Armen Sarkissian is a well-known philanthropist and influential leader with vast business and civic networks in major capitals around the world and leadership positions in international organizations such as the East-West Institute, Euro-Atlantic Security Initiative, Global Leadership Foundation, the World Economic Forum, and others. President Sarkissian has over 25 years of experience in science and technology, global diplomacy, and international business. And this, which I find is very interesting, he is the co-creator of the Tetris Gold Word Tris, a video game, which was very popular in the 1990s. He's also the author of Quantum Politics, and now his best-selling book, Small States Club, which was published earlier this year. And he is also very actively promoting the necessity for S20 organizations. President Sarkissian, we are so delighted to have you with us today, and we invite you to deliver our keynote address.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. And it was quite a long story of my life. In fact, it's pretty much more simpler. I had a couple of lives, one in science. I was theoretical physicist and mathematician. Then I was diplomat and prime minister. Then I was businessman and advisor for many. And lately I was president. Now I'm enjoying being my probably sixth life, which is the life of a free man. And of course, it's a great joy for me to work, to speak today to your institute, but I'm not prepared and I'm not going to deliver a keynote speech or something. And I'm looking forward more for discussion and dialogue rather than presentation, because I have written a book and I was listening to previous speakers that were characterizing the key ideas of that I tried to write in the book, and I would be very much interested in discussing these issues together with your audience and members of this institute or of this gathering. First of all, of course, I do believe that the world is changing and changing very fast. That's why years ago, while thinking about the upcoming new world, for the first time, probably 15 years ago, I started talking about something that people found at that time a bit strange, speaking about the new quantum world and about new quantum politics that will come with the new quantum world. What I mean when I say quantum world, first of all, it means that we are in a world that now living in a world that is different from the world that we lived, let's say, even 30 years ago. I would have called that world the classical world that existed in 20th century, even before that. Classical world in the sense that after the Second World War, for example, it was clear-cut. Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Yeah.
We invite everyone. Please make sure you keep your microphones on mute. Apologies for that, President Sarkissian.
Yeah, it's okay. So I think it's something that it was clear that the rules of the game were clear. They were defined during the Cold War, and everything was going ahead. But in the meantime, there was a second process that was happening worldwide, and that process was connected somehow with the Cold War, because the Cold War was pushing the development of new technology. There was a space race between the United States and Soviet Union. Everybody was trying to use the new technology for military purposes, and the race was from the ground up to the space. That accelerated the development of different technologies that initially were purely military, but then eventually they became civilian. I think the fact that we have this phenomenal possibilities of talking to each other, being on thousands of miles away from each other live, because the world is covered now with fiber optic all over the place. The fact that we are using small gadgets, which are called mobile phones, the fact that we're all engaged, most of us, in places like Instagram, Facebook, and everything, creates an environment where every and each individual has two lives. One is the material life that we live, and the second one is the virtual life, electronic life. And if you look at how much time people are spending on their sort of screens, with their screens, their phones, their computers, television, I think a big part of their daily life is used in virtual world, and more our life is becoming more virtual. We order food, we order things through the virtual one, and that all of that seems very natural for us in the 21st century. But it has a cost, and that cost is the creation of the social media. Is not only networking of people, but also creating completely new rules of behavior for a human being who is half material and half virtual. And with the time, the virtual part will grow more and more. Each of us, because of the virtual life, will continue living forever. Because that information about us, including our today's discussion and this recording, will live forever. Because it's digital. As long as humanity lives, even more, if humanity stops, that the digital recording will continue living, but that creates a completely different environment. And it is changing the whole environment, not only our daily life, but also political life as well. So when I speak about quantum politics, I mean, first of all, the changes that have happened in our lives, first of all, are not classical. We're living in a new world, which is undefined properly, ununderstood properly, unstable, unpredictable in many ways than the one that we lived 20 years ago and before. So that's why I call the life before classical, this one is a quantum one. Secondly, the core engine of this new quantum world is, of course, connected with quantum physics. 120, 130 years ago, when physics was developed, at that time, scientists found through their experiments or observation phenomena that they couldn't explain through the theories of classical physics that was created by great giants, including Isaac Newton. At that time, what was needed a human genius in order to understand what's happening with small particles. Their behavior was radically different than how big particles or big bodies were behaving, including our planet or planets or further down. Because when we were going further down in the smaller scale, we were finding out very abnormal behavior, abnormal from the point of view of classical thought or classical understanding or classical philosophy. While giants like Albert Einstein, Max Planck, Werner Heisenberg, Schroeder, great names, I don't want to go further there, found not only a theory, not only formulas like Schrodinger's formula, but they found a completely different way of looking at the events. Apparently, when you are going down to the elementary particles, the whole idea of predictability is completely different. You are speaking about a phenomenon of probability of a particle coming out from the same conditions, but ending up somewhere else. So how did they do that? They changed the way physicists had to think. It was not just a discovery, okay, well, I discovered the new phenomena. To explain the new phenomena, you had to change the way you think. So that's happening now. That's happening now in political life as well, because the way the world relations between individuals who like quantum of this new world. And this, in this case, the quantum is the one individual that has duality, an individual with her or his phone behaves in this new society is completely different than we were behaving before. And basic things in our lives should be changed as well. Well, let's take the very basic idea of democracy, which is a fundamental one. How people in classical world exercise democracy. They used to go to ballot every, let's say, 5 years. They were voting for that, and then the government was created. They were following the government initially through, let's say, 150 years ago, through newspapers, later through a radio, later through television. But now, and that was a voting once in 5 years. If they were lucky, they were getting their members of the parliament once or twice or 3 times a year to come and see themselves, to explain what's happening. So everything was quite remote. But what's happening today? People are not voting once in 5 years. People are voting 5 times a day through Facebook. And their opinion has huge impact on politicians. That's why there's a huge growth of populism, because politicians listen to this opinion, and these opinions are influenced by many factors. It's not only the right or the wrong of the political decision. So the rise of populism is a phenomenon which is connected with the quantumization of our societies. There are many examples. Probably soon my new book, which is called Quantum Politics, will come up, where I'm trying to explain the way I personally see it. But I started speaking about quantum politics and new quantum world years ago, because of my background. Of course, I'm a physicist myself, and I was teaching quantum physics. I'm not saying that we are run by the same rules of quantum mechanics, but what I'm saying, we are a part of a nature, and this nature is run according to specifics that are connected with our identity and the identity of a quantum. So I brought the small states idea even smaller to the individual. Of course, with the rise of the power of a quantum of individual, what we see in the 21st century is the rise of the small states. Well, small states were always there. In Middle Ages, before that, they were trying to survive. Some of them were smart enough to survive for hundreds of years. And in my book, I described an Armenian state of Cilicia, which was on the Mediterranean Sea, just opposite Cyprus of these days, and that survived 300 years. And how did it survive? There were ingredients of survival, and of course, it was a compact state run by one family, a royal family of Livonians. And then they had a clear identity at that time. They were speaking one specific language, Armenian. They were all Christian, the oldest Christian state in the world, and so on and so forth. But the other thing that the ruling family for 300 years was doing it smartly and very pragmatically, going into partnership once with the Byzantine Empire, the next time with the Mongols, the third time with Damascus, and so on and so forth, being very, very pragmatic and running a very pragmatic. That brings us to the 2 points that I heard from our previous speakers, of speaking about importance of national identity and the importance of the mission and the importance of what you really want to achieve. That's always true. True when you are an individual, or true if you are a company, or true if you are running a country. That's very important, who you are. And you have to be honest with yourself. Because there is a very important combination of pragmatism and a dream. Dream, if it's just dreaming, and it's not pragmatic dreaming that makes the dream into a mission, and the mission into the program, and the program into the plan, how to do one after another, knowing where you want to achieve, then you will be just dreaming. and I think you will lose your pragmatism. So it's a very, very refined combination of pragmatism and this have been proven in my life, living different lives, be that in business, in academia, or in politics, that it's very important that you are very, very pragmatic person, realistic. But on the other hand, you don't lose your human quality of a dream, of thinking about future. Because at the end of the day, our success is judged in many ways, not by the way who we are or what is that we have achieved today, but it's we are always thinking about the future. That's why as humans or thinking sort of animals, for us it's very, very important our next generation, our children. So we live with the happiness of the future life of our children as well. So that means that dream part is there, but in order to be successful. Now, coming to the definition of smartness, because this question was raised, it's of course how to define smartness. It's very, very difficult, but we can simplify that. And I had these discussions for a long period of time, and even recently with Professor Joseph Nye from Harvard, he's a good friend, and he's the author of the famous book about the hard and soft power of the United States. And when we're talking about, even in the case of United States, you can make smart and non-smart decisions on the political base. There are many examples connected with big states, including United States. And a very simple example could be, for example, if you take two of the US presidents, Bush father and Bush son, they both went to war against Iraq. And Bush father, using American hard power, which was the military power, economic power, he combined it with the soft power when he was going to war. And the smart power was engaging others to be a part of this process war. I'm not saying that the war was right or wrong. Did it achieve its goals or not? I'm not discussing that. What I'm discussing here is that in order to go into the war, the smart decision was made to engage others, be that European partners, NATO partners, and so on and so forth. In fact, some of the Europeans were trying even to show their readiness much more vigorously than even the United States. When the son went into war against Iraq, basically the American hard power was used, but the soft power was not there. And then even the European partners didn't much participate in this new war. So the first war was smarter than the second war from the point of view of American foreign policy. So there are many ways how to describe smartness, but definitely smartness is a combination of many things, including realistic understanding who you are. Never believing your own mystic dreams or things that you are trying to sell to others. I think one of the principles is that if you are selling something, you can oversell it, have dreams and speak some things that in reality they don't exist. If you do that in your own real life, if you are selling a car, you can tell whatever you want. And if there's someone that believes and buys that car, it's called business. But if you start selling to yourself something which is not real, starting believing your own nonsense imaginations, then you are in trouble. So it's very, very important that you have to be honest, first of all, to yourself. And if you're running a company or you're running a country, you have to be honest to yourself, through yourself to your people. Otherwise, the moment you lose honesty and you think that being not honest is being political, or that's a part of political life, lying, you are just kidding yourself. And I think you can become a good politician, you can overplay everybody, you can be manipulative, but will you be a leader taking your nation or the company to the future and success? I doubt. Now, this is a little bit to tease you about smartness, and I'm happy to discuss that with you, because there are so many cases in politics in every and each country. Then you start telling people a story, and that story is engaging. People are fed up. They are fed up with the previous government. They want change, and they start believing in. But if you are not honest, it's not possible to create unity in scale and in time. I mean, you will be maybe able to create a unity in scale, have a revolution, okay, and everybody will applaud, everybody will be happy, everybody will be looking for the better future. But will you be able, if you are not honest and you have not clear-cut understanding what you are taking the whole nation with you, will that be working in time? And in many cases, it doesn't, and it backfires, because you were neither professional nor didn't had a real mission. Maybe you had a dream, or maybe you were not honest, but you didn't have a mission. You didn't have a mission that had become a strategy. You haven't calculated that mission, that idea. Maybe you can have an idea of a music, beautiful music, but Mozart, Bach, and Beethoven were great not because they had these beautiful melodies in their mind, but because they could take that melody and make out of the melody a fantastic symphony. So they were not only great visionaries of music, having that great ideas in their heart or their brain, but they could professionally make out of that dream a strategy, a piece, a symphony that lives forever. So I think unity is another thing that was mentioned here, which is true. Now, the small states, 21st century, you look at the small states, what are the richest states in the world? When I speak about the richness, I don't speak about the scale, about integral richness. I'm speaking about per capita. The first 10 countries are small states. It starts with Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Luxembourg, you name it, Singapore, Qatar, Emirates, and so on and so forth. So people, the GDPs per capita or life in those countries are much better than in many of the big states. You take innovation, for example, index. Who are the leading countries, again, per head in the world in innovation? Again, out of the first 10, probably, if you exclude the United States or maybe Britain, the other 8 are small states that are very innovative. Which are the countries, for example, that are the most advanced in digital governing and so on? Again, we are speaking about small states, and the number 1 is a tiny state called Estonia. So it's not about your scale, though. It's not about. I think in order to be, you have first of all to have your ingredients of success, and first of all identify who you are. The fact that you have a lot of gas and oil doesn't mean anything. There are so many countries. Well, if you take a small state like Qatar, at least I know 1 or 2 states that have as much gas as Qatar, but you cannot compare them with Qatar. One of them is the dictatorship, and in the case of Qatar, the country has become very successful. It's one of the safest places on the planet. They are spending huge amount of money on their education, on science, technology. It's a tiny state. It's 400,000 citizens, but they are using their advantage, which is in this case gas, or in the case of Abu Dhabi is Emirates is oil and gas. But you take a country like Singapore, yes, I do agree that Lee Kuan Yew was a genius, because he was a guy that was basically a leader of a country that had three big groups of population, three different religions, basically before that hating each other, fighting each other. But he brought them together around something which is not focusing on religion or which ethnic group do you belong, but to something which is connected with a new identity, which is being a Singaporean. Are you of Chinese origin, Indian, or are you a Muslim or a Christian or Hindu? Doesn't matter. You are Singaporean, and people do believe that that's a stronger identity than. The same way, confronting even their own neighbors, Qatar, have strengthened their identity. You could have said that Qatar is another Arab state, but on the other side, because of confrontation with Emirates and Saudi Arabia years ago, has strengthened. Now they feel about themselves as strong Qataris. So small can be successful and should be successful. And the world is changing, even from the point of view of hard power and soft power. I think the small states have huge advantages as well. If you look, for example, at the amount of money that Emirates is spending on new technology, on data management, or, for example, the only and the first university in the world on artificial intelligence is in Abu Dhabi. It's in Masdar city. It's called Mohammed bin Zayed Artificial Intelligence University, which is run by one of the top guys in this sector in the world, Eric Zing, who is Chinese American. And they are the only university in the world that is focusing on artificial intelligence. And in this new world and the wars that we're facing now, and we see, for example, the war in Ukraine or the wars in the Middle East, or indeed the war that Armenia was facing against Azerbaijan in 2020, and Armenia lost it, was more about technology, about drones, rather than anything else. The same Armenia fighting against same Azerbaijan in 1990s, early 1990s, won the war. Now it lost because then Armenia was ahead technologically of Azerbaijan. Now Azerbaijan, with the help of Turkey, was ahead of Armenia. And the mistake of Armenia and the Armenian government was that we were not smart. And in order to be successful, you have to be ahead of the time, and you have to see where the time moves us, and you have to be ahead of the time. And of course, in the future wars, unfortunately, or this is the reality, it will not matter how many soldiers you have. You have 1 million soldiers or 10 million drones. Who will win the war? The person that will have 10 million drones, not the person that will have 1 million soldiers. That's the reality. And of course, I am preaching that it's important that small states, and small can be tiny, Caribbean, very small states, up to bigger one, we come together. Because the big states are represented. There's G20. It doesn't mean that all big states are in G20. No. The most powerful one, the most successful ones are in G20. They're G7. Again, the biggest, the most powerful ones are in G7. Why on earth we cannot have S20? Of course, it will not cover all small states. But if we have a club, and it's not about the military or economic alliances, we have to start as a club. Because there are successful states, and the other ones can learn from them through an exchange, through coming together, discussing things, learning from each other, and trying to be as successful as the other ones. So the idea of having S20 and creating a club for the small states, and then if we are successful with this idea, S20 can represent us in many places at the meeting of the G20. Because it's very difficult for one small state to go to G20 and speak about its own problems. But it will, if we have a sort of integrated sort of a mission or understanding, we can tell that to G7, G20, European Union, United Nations, anybody. So I do believe that with the time, this time when it's the time of the rise of small and being successful, it's all about how smart you are. I think having an organization that brings us together and creates a platform of exchange of ideas, it's important. I think I should stop here. You know, I used to be professor at university. If you don't stop me, I'll speak 45 minutes times twice, 90 minutes. So I stop here. And I'll be happy if we have questions to discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Sarkissian. And I totally understand. And honestly, we could more than likely have listened to you for the entire day, because so much of what you have to share is really wonderful ideas.
Thank you. You are very kind.
Okay, so I'm going to ask our technical team. Quantrell, can you bring on, spotlight all our panelists for today, please? So that would be Professor Garrett, Nigel, Mfo, as well as Camille, so that we are going to allow them to be able to interact directly with President Sarkissian. So I am sure we are going to see Camille and Mfo, right, who are spotlighted here now. There's so much that President Sarkissian unpacked in his half-hour talk with us. As he said, it hadn't been as he prepared an opening keynote, but I found still it was tremendously powerful. And so, Nigel, I know I'm giving you a challenge here to moderate the session, and get as much as you can out in the half hour that we have allocated for this. But I know you're up to any challenge.
Thank you, Kamla. Challenge accepted. President Sarkissian, thank you very much. I mean, I am enjoying your book, I have to say, and there are so many questions, there are so many challenges ahead of us. But this is not about me. I would like to invite Professor Garrett to give his perspective on what we have heard this morning. Professor Garrett, you're on mute. Unmute you.
I was mute because I was expecting some of our Caribbean friends and Botswana friends to start, and I was going to tap the. Can I suggest we do that? Because otherwise, I would have spoken before, and I'll speak again, and on and on.
Appreciated. So let's put it Mfo.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Mfo.
Good afternoon. Well, I'll say good afternoon, but it's morning that side and afternoon here. Thank you very much once again for inviting me to speak at your conference, and great maybe keynote address from the president. I can pick a few things really with regards to what he said, especially the issue with regards to quantum politics. And I can say Botswana at this point is actually experiencing what he was talking about. If you know, we just changed government last week. We had elections on Wednesday, and then we had a new president sworn in on Friday. After 58 years of one government, meaning one ruling party, we changed to another ruling party. And the drivers really were what President Armen was talking about. It's the people, as the technology. I mean, politics was really coming through in terms of technology. We saw people lobbying. We saw the young generation coming in. The millennials and the Gen Zs came in and voted in large numbers. And actually, people are joking around and say these are the ones who actually changed, the status quo, because the older generations are actually more on the safer side. The younger generation is actually looking at taking risks. And even the narrative right now in social media at this point is like, okay, if the current government or the new government doesn't perform in 5 years, we are going to change them. I mean, we have a lot of options. So they are in position and they are ruling, knowing very well that they could be out in another 5 years. So there's absolutely now no, potential for a government to stay longer if it is not maybe delivering what it needs to deliver. So that really is something that really quite came through for me to say, people vote every day. It's not even every 5 years. I mean, right now, even a week after, going towards the maybe the swearing of the president. I mean, the inauguration now, and the appointment of specially elected members and cabinet ministers. We now, even last week, they were saying, people on social media were saying, we think we need a holiday. Guess what? We have a holiday on Friday. So that everybody can go and celebrate. So I really do identify a lot with what the president was saying in terms of technology is ruling, and it's probably going to be even more into the future. I don't think there's going to be a point where this regresses, but rather it's going to be an advancement of technology, even in different industries, to be able to stay on course and relevant as well as a nation amongst or in the global world. So what we have seen as well coming through, even in the past 58 years, is that our leadership has always thought of culture, broad culture, the traditional culture of Botswana into play in terms of consultations, making sure that citizenry is consulted on every dimension of decision that needs to be made, every major dimension of decision that needs to be made. And stewardship as well, which is actually what even the new government is talking about, to say there needs to be more focus in terms of delivering, taking care of the resources that are there to deliver what the needs of the citizens. And also, I think more prime or more important for Botswana as well is to the diversification of the economy. From, we are a largely diamond producing government or country. And as you know, diamonds are being threatened right now by synthetic diamonds, and maybe other industries as well that are coming up, probably say technology and green energy and so on. So definitely, I do really resonate with the keynote address, in the sense that we are seeing that happening in Botswana at this point. So the biggest challenge for us, diversification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ampho. Let's go to Camille and find out what her thoughts on, especially in the context of what's going on in Jamaica.
Okay, good morning from Jamaica. And we are suffering climate change as we meet, because we have a storm here in November. President Sarkissian, your book is a gift to the world. And it is a gift to us in these smaller states. So much of it resonated with me. And if we look at what has happened in Jamaica, if we go back to the 1970s, when we were toying with socialism, and when we had no foreign exchange, or shelves were very often bare. To get goods, they would marry them, as they call them in Jamaica. So if you wanted oil, you would have to buy something else.
So we have that information, and I told Manuel earlier that I was just sent to them.
Sorry, forgive me. Someone unmuted by an error. Okay, forgive us for that, Camille.
Yes. And we moved from that through to the 1990s, where we had a total economic meltdown, financial sector meltdown, runaway inflation, over 70%, interest rates exceeding 80%. I was in banking at the time. Sometimes you would see interest rates at 100 and odd %. Businesses couldn't afford to pay their loans, and so many businesses failed. And the solution at the time was to sell a lot of Jamaican assets to foreigners. It was the biggest transfer of wealth from locals to foreigners. So by 2013, our country was pretty much bankrupt. We were a basket case. The IMF was done with us. But then in 2013, our then Prime Minister, Portia Simpson Miller, and our Minister of Finance, Dr. Peter Phillips, they decided to bite the bullet. And they brought the country together, the private sector, the unions, the banks were leaders in this, and we changed the economic landscape in Jamaica. And then after that, in 2016, a new administration came in. But just as you highlighted in so many of your cases, the new administration continued what the previous administration had done. And they continued those economic reforms. So where are we today? We have halved the public debt to GDP ratio from 138.7%, which it was in 2013, to 67.9% in 2024. Unemployment is at an all-time low of 4.4%. Our international reserves have quadrupled from $93.5 million to $332 million. US currency, which had been so short, the barges used to come into Kingston Harbor and they wouldn't deliver the oil until they got the money in their bank account. They would park the ships right in front of the office of the BOJ governor. And today, currency is traded freely. Persons can get whatever they need. Our credit rating was recently upgraded by Fitch to BB- with a positive outlook, or we're within inflation target rates of 5.8%. And we know instead of having to borrow money to fix our roads and buy buses and garbage trucks, we can now do that from our own resources. We have created an independent central bank. We have regulations now that govern how our public body boards will be staffed with directors, their term limits, and governance has improved significantly. Now, we are so far from being like any of these smart states. And I couldn't help but marvel when you said that in Singapore, I think it's 30 minutes to check into a downtown hotel from the moment you step off the plane. And that your potholes, we have potholes everywhere. These are potholes that a person can drop into and never be seen again. And you're telling me that in Singapore, the potholes are filled within 48 hours of the authorities being notified. Well, our government has announced a massive campaign, but we are still suffering from very low growth, 1.3% for 2024. And then that matter of corruption or the perception of corruption, because the populism worries me now, because you need leaders who will do what is right, as you say, for the long run and in time. But if they are going to react to everything that comes out on social media, we will not be able to take the steps we need to ensure the future we need for our country. Crime remains a big problem that has to be fought. But your book and what I read gave me so much hope, and I just need to find a way to make sure all our political leaders read it, but I'm going to be working very hard on that. So thank you, sir, for your book.
Thank you very much, Camille. When I read that part of your big book, President Sarkissian, post-truth world, and the absence of what you refer to as objective truth, and of course how it has contributed to the rise of populism. And then this morning, you said we don't vote every 5 years now or every 4 years. We now are voting 5 times per day. For me, the challenge of leadership, and I go back to to Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew was very clear about where he wanted to carry Singapore, and he understood the magnitude of the task and how difficult it was. And I think one of the things he did was surround himself with the quality of leadership necessary to face the brutal facts and to execute in a very disciplined fashion. And what comes to mind is that any leader in this environment needs to be aware of the impact of social media and needs to therefore be interacting with that social media in almost real time. But that will require a certain level of transparency, a certain level of being, open with what we are trying to achieve, the strategies we are adopting to achieve that objective, and very clear, and I go back to, I'm a metrics guy, very clear metrics about how we are progressing towards achieving that. So I'd be interested in either you or Professor Garrett, because Lee Kuan Yew ran Singapore like a corporation. And he surrounded himself with smart people, smart, honest, humble people who were committed to building Singapore. How do we attract and get those kinds of people as opposed to the charlatans who would react and give?
No, this would be.
Either you or Professor Garrett, I would be interested in hearing.
Please, let's hear President Sarkissian. You can hear me anytime. This is the one. This is the one chance we have.
I'm also interested to hear from you as well, Professor. Then I'll comment on all of the contributions.
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting today here in London. It's the 5th of November, which is Guy Fawkes Day, which is when the attempt was to burn down the Houses of Parliament. And there'll be lots of fireworks and things tonight. But more importantly, it's the 5th of November in the US. And think about what's going to happen overnight there. So if you want a classical system, there's one. And despite all the types of social media and everything else that's happening, and the classical system based as the original Greek democracy was based on slavery. So it's a very interesting piece of world history we will start experiencing tonight. Last night I was coming back late with a taxi driver, and he was, as all London taxi drivers do, was talking about anything that he wanted to. The passengers don't stand a chance of joining in the conversation or even trying not to listen. But he was saying how he had just gone through loads of box sets, how much he was streaming, how much his family was streaming. And he was going on and on about this, and I was trying to express no interest whatsoever. It didn't affect him. And then at the very end, he suddenly said, "And do you know what I've done?" So I said, "No." And he said, "I've stopped really almost all my social media connections. And I've actually turned to books." And he then listed 5 books he'd read in the last 2 weeks. 3 of them were trashy novels. 2 of them were quite serious pieces of philosophy. And I was very interested in that because I'm finding that happening with some of the younger generation now as well, that in a sense, we've overdone social media to the point of acute boredom. And people are just switching off and they're having to rethink, well, what are we about? And that's part of the reason I mentioned the Ubuntu thing, the I am because you are. Where are we now as the first wave, the huge tsunami of AI is washing out at the moment, and it'll continue without a doubt. But I was going back to, well, schools and thinking and learning, and just pulled out a few bits from that. If we're talking about smart futures for these countries, I mean, I got interested in this area when I was in architecture school, and one of the first projects we had, these were live projects. So these were real-time issues for real people, where we use the academics as the resources to be able to pull them off the taxi rank and bring them into the projects to solve the immediate problems we were facing. Now, that's a very particular way of learning, and it's one I've used all my life. And it was, what came out of it for me was that, how is it when you have issues? The first issue I was facing was a group of very poor people in the south of London whose housing was appalling, although technically owned by the local authority, but no one was doing anything about it. And then later, using the learning process we developed there, to look at the department of Corrèze in central France, which was the poorest in the whole region. And again, no one seemed to care a damn about it. In fact, it was a standing joke in the country. If you came from the Corrèze, then you were cold and wet by definition. You produced the most basic and awful of vegetables, and the only manufacturing in the area was, believe it or not, accordions. So they were just a standing joke. And we, as quite a large group of students, came in over 3 summers and worked with them on what resources do you have in terms of physical, but most importantly, what resources do you have in terms of people? And how can they begin to source their own output? Because nobody else is going to do it for you. It's brutal, but it's true. And just 4 little things I mentioned now came out of it. One of the things we were looking at is, how do you develop the rate of learning in an individual, in a group, in a county or department, in this case, or in a nation? How can we make sure that the rate of learning is equal to or greater than the rate of change in the wider environment, in what nowadays is often called the polycrisis? And within that, then, how do you look at what we were calling the P's and Q's? How do you begin to help people think differently about problems, but particularly about questions? And in fact, in the end, we devise this as puzzles and questions, P's and Q's. And the puzzle may be fiendishly, technically difficult, but it is soluble within the statement of that issue. The questions depend on your values as to how you actually frame the context of how you're going to start problem solving. And those 2 things we've developed in various ways, both in colleges, in schools, and in communities. And I found that very interesting and still continue to work on it. But one of the things I learned quickly was, unless you implement what you're trying to do and you have very fast feedback systems, the cybernetic systems have to be very good indeed, then you don't really learn that much, because other people will squash what you're doing. And so in the end, we developed the notions of action learning to be able to, which we developed particularly in China with the development of the new business schools in China. Unfortunately, that was a wonderful 9 years and then squashed by the Tiananmen Square repression. And although it's coming back now, I'm delighted to say in the last year, some of those people have reappeared and are restating that. But these notions of speed of learning and the ability to are what's in my mind at the moment. And I think for small states who really, most people honestly don't care about, they've got to find their own salvation. And I would argue through the physical resources, but especially through the people resources.
Thank you, Professor Garrett. President Secretary, I have one question, and you can address it as you respond to all the
Yes,
comments.
please.
What are your thoughts on BRICS and how should small states approach it? So over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll start with responding with a nice story about Guy Fawkes.
Thank you.
But I live in London now as well. So Guy Fawkes, the last weekend was Guy Fawkes, and I live not very far from Battersea Park. And it's a place that everybody comes for Guy Fawkes, for fireworks and everything, huge crowd. And what happens usually, the elderly people come, they watch the fireworks and go. And then until 3 o'clock midnight, the youngsters who are between 13 to 16, 17 are chaotically running around on the street, shouting. And 80% of these youngsters are girls. And this is in London. And I look at these young ladies who have so much energy, and they are so much excited with what's there. They are together. I think the whole environment that creates. So I was thinking, so I didn't sleep Guy Fawkes weekend, and thanks to these young ladies. And I think, again, they were proving what I was saying. Every and each of them, while being excited, going together, and so everybody had the phone. So their life, or all of that excitement was between writing someone. Even when the police came to relax them, instead of being afraid of police, they started recording police, going close to the policeman and just putting them on a video, probably with an aim to put their own on their own site, on Facebook or something. How the poor police can control these young people, boys and girls, when the culture is so different. They don't listen, they don't understand that it's 3 o'clock midnight. There are people that are already sleeping. I was enjoying looking at, but there are a lot of our neighbors probably that lost their night. Now, today's election, is it going to be another sleepless night for me, watching what the American elections will bring us to? I hope they will not burn Guy Fawkes, the parliament. I hope they don't have the desire to do that. And I think because it's very important for the stability of the world that the United States has the biggest democracy, the biggest not in number of people, but biggest as its impact on the world, shows the world that America is there as a superpower, and it's not only superpower because it has hard power, but it's also superpower because it has a soft power. That's the most difficult part. That brings us to the importance of people and architecture. And living in London, you always have this challenge looking at the different times, and you spoke about architecture. I think the beauty of London is that the center of London, thanks to the efforts of a lot of people, including His Majesty, has kept the classical architecture. Okay, it's already the modern one is coming closer and closer and closer. And the question is that will that modern architecture be living in the future or not? As the classical one, as the Victorian or the pre-Victorian and after Victorian architecture in London, or the center of Paris, or center of a lot of European capitals. And that's the challenge, because at the end we don't know. The modern buildings, will they have a long life or not? Or pretty soon they will become boring, just the cubes of glass and metal. So this is again about culture, the importance of culture in our lives and our decision-making processes. And I like your emphasis on learning and human beings, because you're absolutely right. If in the case of Abu Dhabi, we're speaking that the natural resource, which is very well used, is oil, But in the case of Singapore, it's people. In the case of Israel, it's people. In the case of Ireland, it's people. And in the case of a small nations like Luxembourg, it's about the visionary leadership. And in the case of Norway, it's people. Norway is a country that people think that they are successful because they have oil, which is true they have, but their oil is the number 21st or 20th in the world by its volume. But that country is using their hydropower. It's a human decision. And it's covering up to 90% of Norway's energy needs. And they are using also wind. And with wind, hydro is covering 1.5 times of all of their needs. So they can have the luxury of using their oil in order to sell and put the money into their national fund, state fund, which is the biggest in the world, $1.6 trillion. In a small nation, $1.6 trillion of a fund. And if that fund is investing worldwide in new technology and many other things. So it's all about people and smartness of these people, how to run it. A lot of nations are successful because they don't have the oil and gas, or indeed the diamonds, like in Botswana. But having diamonds doesn't mean that you are successful. It's how you use your advantages, the most important thing. Learning is one of the most important things in our lives, and I think learning is that makes us human. Years ago, they wrote a big article about me in Financial Times, and there was a result of a long discussion, sort of a Financial Times usual lunch, 1 pages. But then they put as a title what I told them: the moment I stop learning, I will die. I do believe in that, because every day I am trying and I'm learning something. That makes me human. And learning is very challenging, because the way we'll learn is completely different the way we were learning in Soviet Union, the way people learn today. And I was lucky, because when I was born in Soviet Union, where everything was wrong, everything was communism, everything was controlled by the state, there was one place there was huge competition, and that place was called education and science. So if you think about Soviet Union, it was a communist state. People didn't have much rights. Everything was controlled by the state. You couldn't speak much about your ideas about politics on everything. The economy was in shambles because it was all controlled by the state. But there was one sector which was very competitive. That was education. In fact, we had Soviet Union as a communist state, and inside Soviet Union, educational system was absolutely capitalistic. Because Soviet Union understood that there is only one way that they compete with the West, through the strength of people or science. That's why Soviet Union managed to send the first satellite to the space, and Gagarin, the first cosmonaut. Not because they had a big industry, no, they had very strong fundamental science. Why? Because it was competitive. And I am a product of that. Mm-hmm. I had to compete all the time from my childhood with a lot of talented people. As a reward, there were rewards for that. When I was student at the university, I was getting a stipend named after Lenin. Just being a good student, you were getting a stipend. And if you were the best of the best, you were getting a stipend, which was a salary of a worker for just being a student. Of course, it was named after Lenin because Lenin was the greatest scientist in the world. They believed so. But the fact is, and when I was a PhD student, I wrote my PhD thesis when I was graduate student, but I stayed PhD student for 3 years. You know why? Because I was getting, again, a stipend named after Lenin, which was 360 rubles, which was the salary of associate professor, for doing nothing, for just being a good student and so on and so forth. So it was absolutely a sort of a fierce competitive environment. That makes us human. And from that time, I've learned that one thing that I always hated from my youth was being politically correct. Because this was what you had to do in Soviet Union. You were not allowed to speak your opinion. But when I was in science, several of my articles wrote as a continuation of what Albert Einstein wrote his last 2 articles with Professor Rosen. And this was about the new theory of gravitation by metric. And I wrote 3 articles. They became very famous both in Soviet Union and in abroad. They were reprinted in New York at Astrophysical Journal. I was getting a lot of letters from famous scientists, but also a lot of calls from KGB because they didn't understood these articles with integrals and mathematical formula that what this was conspiracy, spying. And how do you explain to someone who doesn't know basic physics that this is physics? But the reality was, if you in your life can challenge Albert Einstein, all my life, I was challenging anybody telling me anything. I'm trying to say why, how. I'm challenging that. I believe in God, but I came to God through science, through understanding the beauty and complexity of this universe. Not because I believe, because I was told by my grandmother, who secretly used to go to church in Soviet Union, that there's an old man running my life. No. Because I understood that when I started doing physics, I understood that this is a universe when everything is made of molecules and then atoms. Remember Mendeleev's table? And all atoms are made by a smaller number of particles, okay? Electrons, positrons, protons, yes, you know about that. Mm-hmm. And then we found out that going further, that they're all made of only 12 particles, quarks and specific leptons, only 12. The whole universe, galaxies, sun, earth, us, thinking machines, the same 12 particles. And if we go further down, we'll find out that 12 are made of 3. And what about then we go further down? We'll find everything is made of 1. What's the name of that particle? God. So it's all about education and challenging truth. So that is one thing that I found here. My grandchildren go to school in Britain. I find unhappy for me because they are not given enough challenge. They are said, okay, don't speak much. If you are strong in mathematics, shut up, because some of your friends are not strong. They will feel offended. This is the populism inside the school. Okay? This is the communism inside the school. When our human behavior is every child has a talent. One has a talent in mathematics, the other one singing, swimming, reading. The other one has a talent of talking. The third one has a talent of listening, or a talent of a craftsman. Who said I'm a better person than Chip and Dale that was a craftsman, created fantastic furniture. He didn't know mathematics, didn't. But he created fantastic furniture. So I think we have to give this to every child. And this, they're thinking about, this child has autism. What does autism mean? All of the great scientists was autistic because they were abnormal. Okay? Albert Einstein was not speaking until he was 5 years old boy. Can you imagine if he was born now, they will start giving him medicine. And they will ruin Albert Einstein, will not have the theory of relativity. I mean, learning and education is the one important thing for every nation, big or small. Doesn't matter small. And I would love to say a couple of words about, of course, Botswana. I mean, I like Botswana. I'm planning to come to Botswana. It's a fascinating story how having diamonds, but having diamonds doesn't mean anything. There are so many African states. Russia has diamonds, so what? It's all about how do you use your advantage in order to build. And a good example for you, for example, is the same Emirates. It has one of the biggest reserves of oil in the world, but they put their money, educating scientists, and they have built nuclear power plant the Koreans have built for them, 20 gigawatt. Okay? United Arab Emirates is not burning oil. They are are using nuclear power plant of 20 gigawatts. Because 20 gigawatts of a plant is not only the plant, it's how do you run it, because you need engineers, education, and all of that stuff. And it's safe and it's sound, but also it's a base for developing nuclear science in the future. And then you use your oil to produce, I don't know what. You can produce from oil anything, from energy up to polymers, up to black caviar, whatever you like. So why burn it? I think the burning of a thing is the burning of oil is the most brutal medieval way of using that valuable ingredient, because you can do many things out of oil instead of burning it. Okay, and the same is with the diamonds. Diamonds, there's always this Oppenheimer's story: the diamonds forever. No, they are not forever. As you said, people can create now artificial diamonds through huge pressure and so on and so forth. And I think to recognize what is artificial, what is non-artificial, is becoming like to recognize what is in this new world, what is true, what is not true, because the fake truth is so overwhelming. So it's very difficult to find out what is really true and what is not true in this new world that we are living. So we have to find a ways much more complex and complicated, and that's a challenge. I wrote a letter congratulating your president, Botswana, because he is going to face a huge challenge. After the success, it's always very difficult. If you are running a failed state, you can always blame the previous government. They stole everything. They are corrupt. But if you have to continue success, that's much more challenging. And then people will not judge him, the president, because he was a little bit successful. They would like him to be much more successful than before. So it's a huge challenge. And I wish that you continue your evolution forward with success, because you have become a success story in Africa, and that's why I've chosen. I've looked at several African states. Some of them I have visited. I've not been in Botswana. I would love to come to Botswana, but I've learned so much about Botswana. So I think I'll come and give a lecture about your history to your students, because it was so fascinating. Now about evolution, okay? This brings me to the idea of what was happening in Jamaica. I think there are several ways, as we spoke about, how to make a change. Through a revolution, okay? I prefer something which is called evolution. It's more natural and human. It takes time. It's much more difficult than just announcing that I will change the whole world, okay? And in many cases, when the Social Democrats came to power in 1917 in Russia, they were preaching things that were so close to Christianity, Lenin and others, equality and all of that stuff. Eventually, they became a huge dictatorship. And Joseph Stalin killed 20 million of his own people. So I prefer something which is called and will be evolution, and I prefer something that in 21st century can be called our evolution. I've written an article about this in Wall Street Journal. Our evolution is rapid evolution. Our evolution is revolution, but not in the form of a revolution, but rapid evolution. Because all of us, small and big, are in a big race against time. And time, okay, because of our development, is moving faster and faster and faster. And I don't have to tell you. You see that the changes are happening quicker and quicker and quicker. So what you need is an evolution, but a rapid. Otherwise, we will fail, okay? And I think I just probably answered a couple of questions. Is there any last one? Ah, Brexit.
BRICS, no, BRICS, it's BRICS, not Brexit. So the Brazil, India,
BRICS,
China,
yes.
yeah, that group.
No, both of them have the same answer. Both Brexit and BRICS. I mean, BRICS is a product of the common geopolitical development. Will it survive or not? It's a different question. I think we are living in a very interesting time, but you can call it interesting unless it doesn't hurt. Then it's academic. It's interesting how China has developed, what's happening with America, and so on and so forth. But what is happening with BRICS? I think I will take you a little bit back. When did it all start? Okay. It started with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And it started with a famous American writer writing a wrong thesis, that this is the end of the history. With a Japanese name, American writer, writing that this is the end of the history, Fukuyama, which is absolutely wrong. It was the beginning of the new era. It was not the end of the world history. It was the beginning of the new history. And a lot of people misunderstood that. A lot of politicians thought this is it. Capitalism has won the fight against communism. Everybody has to be capitalist. And the moment you are capitalist, automatically you become democratic. Look what happened. Is Russia a democratic state? You can think so. It's a capitalistic, a special one, oligarchic. Because we are human. The same idea can mutate. Yeah? That's a part of evolution, mutation. The idea of capitalism, the idea of democracy mutates. And you get something which is called a sort of a democracy because people go to the ballot. Going to a ballot doesn't mean anything. And democracy doesn't start and finish with democratic elections. It's about checks and balances, about balancing the power. Okay. One of the reasons, and the main reason that I retired from Armenian politics, was that I was fighting against our constitution. It was changed in 2013, giving huge powers to prime minister, and it was not balancing with the power of the parliament and the president. And I told, let's change the constitution, I retire. It's not about me. It is about the future presidents and parliaments that can balance the power. Because without balance, you get a mutation. Okay. It's a direct way to dictatorship. So I think BRICS has started because the world has changed. BRICS has started because the United States economy was run by an idea that everything is fine. Let's go to the cheapest place of production. Where is that? In China. And it's not only production went to China, but also the know-how. And Chinese are very disciplined, organized people. See, what's the result? So political decisions are important, okay? Making a decision that we have to rush into climate, new world, which is green, fantastic. Has anybody calculated how much time do we need in order our whole energy sector becoming green? Has anybody calculated? I have. How much solar panels I need in order to cover a country like United States or China only green? Okay, fine. We all say the emotions, okay? Again, ideology, not pragmatism. While Abu Dhabi, Emirates were pragmatic, having all of the oil in the world, they built a nuclear power plant, pragmatically looking at the reality. Okay? So we need years and years. Because we rushed, and because there are always great talents like Elon Musk, he rushed everybody into electric car. Fine. What is an electric car? It's an iPad, a battery, and 4 wheels. Where is an iPad built? In China. Where are the batteries built? In China. Where are the four wheels built? Big multinational companies like Pirelli and others are owned by Chinese. So who is going to buy Mercedes-Benz or Rolls-Royce with all of this genius engineering? Who cares? The new car is an iPad, a battery, and a four wheels. So the German industry is going to suffer, okay? Because decisions which are, it is absolutely right that we have to do everything to make this planet green. But we have to do wise through rapid evolution, not through revolutions. Germany was Germany because it was living on a very cheap Russian gas. Where is that cheap gas now? Germany had the best company in the world that was doing nuclear energy, Siemens Energy, Siemens. They closed it. Who has now the know-how of building nuclear power plant? Korea, South Korea, China, Russia, America. French had, Germans had, it's gone. So we are living in very sensitive times, and it's very, very interesting times, but I hope it doesn't hurt much, but it hurts a lot of people. And we will see many things happening in the world. I think if we continue the way we are doing, living, the Brexit, fine. Was it right or wrong? At the end of the day, it matters how you are going to use that opportunity. If you don't use it well, then it's a failure. If you use it well, and there are both options available. Being so close to Europe, but not apart, not controlled by regulations, over-regulations of Europe, it's a blessing. But can the politicians use that as an advantage and make Britain again a huge bridge between America, Europe, China, Europe, and so on and so forth, become the biggest trader in the world? Britain has everything available to be one. Again, to become the banking sector, center of the world, trading center of the world. Will they do it? So it's not about Brexit. It's all about, is it right or wrong? You can stay in Europe, be successful, or you can exit Europe and be successful. It's all about how do you do that? And the same is with BRICS. Okay? I think it's a reaction that people don't feel safe economically, maybe politically, and so on. And that's why they go and create a new structures. Okay? Will it be successful or not will all depend on the future evolution. Okay? And it will depend very much on US policies. Is United States going to run smart policies? If they run smart policies, then interesting solutions with or without BRICS. If the policies will not be smart, and if the BRICS policies will not be smart, if they will become a sort of a non-economic, but a sort of a military or a security organization, then I don't think that. So we are on a crossroad of many things, from artificial intelligence up to global geopolitics. Interesting times. It's interesting unless it hurts. Thank you very much. I hope that covers everything.
Thank you so very much. The old curse, may you live in interesting times, or maybe it's an opportunity. Who knows?
It's always opportunity. I think
I agree with
smart businessman, it's always opportunity. Look at Musk. He got the opportunity, came with a car that you can just run on a battery only 100 miles or 150 miles. It's crazy. What do you do with a car that runs 200 miles on a battery? Unless you have a technology replacing the battery, like in your phone, not phone, in something that you change the battery, put the new one. Then you will have electric. But the moment the same cars in London, electric cars, electric taxis, which is fantastic, the air in London is better. But they are still using electricity, which is generated by burning something. Am I right? Somewhere, something. And this planet is very small. Doesn't matter where you burn. It destroys the climate. You burn it in London or you burn in I don't know, Edinburgh. Doesn't matter. Sorry, I have to run.
Thank you very, very much. This was very, very informative, very thought-provoking, and we have some work to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all of you, and I enjoyed our discussions. Looking forward to come both to Botswana and Jamaica.
Let's come to the Caribbean. Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
President
We have
Sarkissian,
I'll pass on the message, President. I'll pass on the message.
Yes, I'm coming.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So,